We're now beginning our discussion of the identity conversation. Our core identities, the authors define them as sort of defining how we see ourselves. Am I a smart person? Am I good at my job? Am I knowledgeable? Am I creative? Am I a good person? Am I worthy of love? All of these ways that we identify ourselves are so core to our being that we're not even often consciously aware that we have them. They're so much a part of our worldview that may not even be aware consciously that that is how we're defining ourselves. So how do you define yourself? If an event occurs that challenges your sense of self, this can be the most threatening of events or conversations. And we tend to respond very defensively and sometimes destructively. And it inhibits a good conversation. It makes the conversation more difficult because we feel threatened. Notice also that we cling to denial. No, that's not true. When something threatens who you think you are, denial is the most immediate response. Let's say that you consider yourself an honest person, and yet you've been accused of doing something dishonest. Your first response is, no, I am an honest person. Instead of responding with denial and defensiveness, which again is going to shut off someone from speaking to you, try to respond to get more information. Realize that your identity is being challenged and find out the basis for what they're saying. Realize also that we cling to this all or nothing. I am either an honest person or a dishonest person. In fact, most of us are much more complex human beings than being all of anything. Yes, you may be a good son. That doesn't mean that sometimes you behave thoughtlessly to your parents. In other words, you're not always a good son. Sometimes you haven't been kind. Doesn't make you a bad person. So rather than getting stuck with these all or nothing biases, realize that even good people sometimes do bad things, but you're better than the worst thing you ever did. However, if you start out with denial, you're never going to be able to explore that. It's possible that you made a mistake. It's also possible that you're a good person. Both of those things are possible. At the other end of the spectrum, in other words, people who aren't just denying that this happened or denying that I am a good student, I am a good person, I am a good boyfriend, I am a good son. Rather than getting into denial, some people blame themselves too much, and that inhibits their development as well. We are harder on ourselves if we're defined by one act. If you messed up one time, does that mean that you are a bad person? Of course not. But some of us are so hard on ourselves that we can't see past it, and it actually inhibits us from developing as a person. So behaving with a bit more distance and maturity helps us. But first you have to identify your identity. How is it that you define yourself? Are you smart? Are you a good employee? Are you a nice girlfriend? Are you a good friend? How is it that you're defining yourself? And then realize that there are going to be some trigger points when that feels challenged to you. And that those might be, you might be responding emotionally. Start looking at how other people ground their identity and how it therefore things may feel very threatening to them when their identity gets challenged. Your father defines himself as a good father, and if you say, well, you didn't do this for me, that may trigger in your father some emotional response that makes him defensive. So identify your own identity issues and any triggers for that. try to step out of your body if that's possible. Look at yourself objectively and say, how do I behave when I feel attacked? Again, remember, no one is always or never anything. So hold on to that and stance, not the but stance. So I am an honest person and I did behave dishonestly this time. You're going to make mistakes. Everyone does. Acknowledging your mistakes makes you calmer. It also lets other people approach you with your mistakes more readily because you're not going to bite their head off. If you reduce the cost, the emotional cost of others coming to you, they're more likely to point out mistakes. And understanding you made a mistake is the first step on doing better in the future. So when in doubt, even when you think someone's wrong, even when you think someone's unfair, if someone has come to you to point out what they think is a mistake, if you're not sure what to say, just start with thank you. You want to encourage people to point out if you've made a mistake. It doesn't make you weaker. It doesn't mean you even agree with them necessarily. You can instead, if you start with, thanks for telling me, let's look at this problem. It helps you come up with better solutions and to engage that other person in helping you come up with a better solution. It makes you look like the bigger person, the more mature person. So unfortunately, when we get defensive, we get smaller as a person. And when we get too hard on ourselves, thinking that we're failures, we get smaller as a person, and your job's to get bigger. So get some balance here. Be open to other people. Don't try to control what they're doing. Try to prepare for whatever their response is. And start visualizing, and I mean it really, visualize the future. How could the future be different? See it in your mind. If something's simply too emotional or too threatening, take a break. Things can often get very escalated very quickly. It's not helpful. Take a break. Distance in terms of time can help you have a calmer conversation and examination. And it helps give you better perspective on yourself. So there's almost nothing that needs to be solved this very minute. You can always say to somebody, you've given me a lot of things to think about. Let me ponder on this. Can I get back to you? That's a much better response than starting to fight with people or getting accusatory. So work on calming down a little bit and getting a little bit more perspective. Acknowledge that you can make mistakes and still be very competent. You can make mistakes and you're not a bad person.